Okay, good. All right, we're going to call this meeting of the Capital Committee to order Wednesday, December 6th. It's 8:05 a.m. President Richard Hussey, Pete Kaiser, myself, Peter McEachern, Christy Kickham, and Jason Bridges, and our ex officio, Libby Gibson. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
So moved.
All right, accepted unanimously. And entertain a motion to accept the minutes of November 1st and hold the minutes of November 15th pending revisions.
So moved.
Thank you. There being no nays, carries unanimously. Is there any public comment? Okay, I've got a couple members here, a couple citizens here, but no public comment. We're going to start this morning with a discussion of the capital request for the DPW garage facility. I'm working from some notes here. It's still a busy time of the year for me, too. What I'd like to do is have Rob start with a review of the plan drawings and his timeline, and we'll do a Q&A before we cut him free. He is also setting up a presentation. The idea is that we're getting an idea of we're being asked to approve a dollar amount, and we're getting an idea of specifically or better than generally what is going to be contained within the building. We have a series of plans that we can refer to, and I'll bring those up with Rob in a moment. Just for our own committee, just for the discussion, please keep in mind this is just our evaluation and recommendation discussion is not today. So we'll do that next week when we meet, and just ask that you please hold off on deliberation type discussion so we can stay on track. Let's just get any informational questions answered this morning, and we can proceed later on the evaluation. Rob, good morning.
Good morning.
So insofar, as I said, I'd like to do the plans. I know you have a presentation. I understand that there's some disconnect with the needs assessment and the final plans in terms of not having been resolved what's going to go where. But we do need to have an idea of, we need to have a pretty good handle on what we're approving to be used, what areas will be used for work and storage and to what extent. And I had hoped that you could use the work and storage area plans that are on page 43 to 62 of your packet, which are based on the various industry standards and actual DPW functions and equipment. And then the plan view of the buildings, which has general square footages, which is page 76 of the packet. And that those buildings are quite a bit smaller than the aggregate of the work and storage area plans. And if you could kind of give us an idea by comparing the work and storage area plans to the proposed building, just starting from the first plan on page 43 and going through each one until indicating the extent that that particular work area transfers to the proposed buildings. Then we get your thoughts on timeline and cut you free. And if you want to start first with your presentation, the video, that would be great too.
Sure. So I'm going to back up just briefly here and say the needs like that sounds great, and I would say had those questions been presented, a week ago for this presentation, I probably could have worked with a consultant to really dig in and provide that to you. Just a little bit of background here. January 27th was when the final report from Weston and Sampson for the facility needs assessment and feasibility study was released. I received a copy of that when I arrived in April, read through it, and it probably wasn't until June timeframe that this project came to the forefront again in discussions. And we sat down with the engineering firm again to essentially go back after I had had a time to read the facility needs assessment and feasibility study, to then go back and say we need to adjust what has been discussed previously. We did that. We spent probably the better part of a day going through what was asked for previously, what could be sliced and diced off of this to come off of the original 24 million roughly budget for this project. I'm not going to sit here today and tell you that this is a fully baked project at this point. What we're looking to do is we've looked at it every which way, and what I could tell you is we have real demonstrated needs, and the video I would basically have you briefly watch. It's a minute and a half, and I basically would say, would you work here? Looking at this space. That's a start. We have a comprehensive list of all the equipment that we would say is required to be in indoor storage. That's been identified, and that's part of the initial needs assessment. Beyond that, though, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and 100 square feet here and 1,000 square feet there. I think the demonstrated need is this is a massive garage project, right? We have a need for a centralized training area, which could be double used as break room, lunch room. We have a need for showers, bathrooms, and then we have shop space. That's it. That's a conglomeration of taking down all but the two main facilities that exist out there, which is the DPW admin building and the newer mechanics garage. Everything else, we have two buildings out there that were relocated and repurposed decades ago that are still up on the steel girders it was delivered on that are highlighted in the video as well. We have an old garage that was built in lowlands and has some issues there as well. And then we would relocate the fuel station on our own. We would relocate the salt shed and basically take on site improvements on our own. And that's another point of discussion here. That's only to what I would term artificially manage the budget. I've been involved with a number of these capital improvement projects, and I would tell you, you have different sides of the coin. You have some people in the public that will say, why wasn't that included in the overall project cost? And some that say, why would you include it? So I don't know where the committee's at with that, but it's definitely something worth discussing. So we could say, and I think what you're looking for is sort of a defense of, are we actually providing the space that we currently have in this new building, and how are we doing it? Happy to provide that once we have that information. I don't have that information for you today. With that, if we could direct our attention at the screen behind you.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt you for one moment.
Sure.
So last meeting, we did indicate there would be a review of the plans, kind of as a stepping off point for our further discussion. And I apologize if I wasn't very specific about what we were looking for, but clearly the concern is a passable dollar number. The concern at the moment is a dollar number that's passable at annual town meeting, and of course that means that it needs to be substantiated. If the committee is comfortable recommending an investment of $15 million without a clear understanding of what's been given up from the work and storage area plans, ultimately, we'll have that discussion, and that's how we'll proceed. And whether it's a lesser dollar amount, which may or may not be the case, that's how we'll address it too. But I get your point. You're willing to demonstrate what of the work area plans from that assessment are going to be incorporated and to what extent, and but it's not something you can do right now. And
well, what I'm saying is this: if you looked at the feasibility study,
yeah.
Which was, I believe, forwarded around. The recommended plan is essentially a centralized garage, that it's not multiple buildings as some of the concepts showed. It's a centralized garage that incorporates employee facilities, shop space, and vehicle storage. Like I said, that's it. So it's really a matter of how large is that building to accommodate those needs. And we've had 3 different versions of that, which basically have sliced off some of the other ancillary site improvements that were originally proposed, that were part of that $24 million ask that this study came up with. the bare bones, pared down version came back with contingency, I think it was 18. So we're basically somewhere in the 18 to 24 range, depending on if you're going to do the site work with this project or if we're going to be expected to do it as a department. So the point is, we either have staff pulled off of other responsibilities to focus on doing site improvements here on our campus, or we bake it all in and have it done while we continue to service the island.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it comes down to.
Thank you. Peter?
And that's what I support. And I think one thing you missed was 15 million or under. I think it's over 15. And I would be one of the ones that would champion spending more than the 15 million, getting it closer to 18 or 20. And I would not take away the existing staff's operations, because that's why we're sitting here talking about a building today. That's not our job. That's not our forte. Whichever company we procure, they should be one-stop shop, period.
Thank you, Peter. Rob, would you go ahead and, at your leisure?
The video just started. So this is the crew garage, a little walkthrough. Again, I'd just ask you to take a look and objectively say, is this a place that you would go work in? There's just so many challenges here. That's it. So it loops. I mean, the point is that, and as the study has highlighted, these are spaces that are just not suitable for redevelopment, and just honestly, they're not even used. They're not even suitable for continued use. But clearly, we're continuing to make use of them. We have lots of challenges out there. I think that's probably the easier part of this discussion is what we're dealing with currently. So we're dealing with all kinds of different things that came out of a safety audit that we did independently this summer, and still addressing some of those issues there. Some of the bigger issues that I think should be discussed here, particularly with new building construction, we're excited to really take a look at investing solar into the roof out here for any new building. And frankly, I would really advocate to incorporate solar into on roofs of any new municipal buildings. I think it makes sense. The technology is there, and frankly, I think it'd be tough not to incorporate, at least structurally, in the building to support solar, whether it's part of the initial investment or a phased approach moving forward. And there's a matter of water quality issues, and it's part of the site work and dealing with not just site drainage, but you're dealing with a fleet that includes, it's more of a industrial commercial type use. It's not just passenger vehicles. With that, you're dealing with greasing and regular maintenance or frequent maintenance on vehicles. dealing with the stormwater runoff associated with, or vehicle washing is a whole nother ballgame. We cut the vehicle wash station out of this to retrofit a bay in the DPW mechanics garage that was originally proposed. It's a fairly expensive ticket, but when we're dealing with what we're dealing with now with water quality concerns associated with Long Pond and discharges to it, I think it's on the table. We need to talk about it. I mean, it just makes sense. And as far as longevity for vehicles as well, I mean, you finish a month or a season of salting roads and dealing with just the outdoors, and you bring the vehicle in and you wash it down before you put it away. We don't have those capabilities to the extent that a wash bay would provide.
Sure. Peter, did you have a?
I mean, Rob, that's an item if you're in the private sector to wash down vehicles, lawnmowers, dump trucks. It's mandated. I know we don't have to comply with OSHA, but those are best practices because you have to. And I would not want to see those type items cut out of our budget. I think that a washdown station, not only for a human being but for equipment, that's protecting the fixed asset, all of them. And having been in that business, I would be one who would regret not having that line item in. I think it's. Was there an echo?
Echo. Steve? Richard?
So the 18.5 number doesn't include the wash bay or solar.
That's correct. Just to mention that solar was never part of the consideration for the ask here.
Right.
It's just something that's been discussed recently.
And you're right. Why would anyone want to work here? I mean, that's incredible to look at that. How did it get to that point?
That's a good question. I mean, I will say one of my whole points here with staff was, we didn't get here in a day. We're not going to, we need to keep our own house clean, right? So I have incorporated steps since I've arrived to address specific issues and general issues with our campus. It's from vehicle cleanliness to campus cleanups to basically getting our house in order so that ultimately, we have not just better inventory and a safer environment, but, you have a little bit more respect about what you're dealing with. And when something's out of place, it's noticeable. It has gone a long way in, I think, having people recognize that, this is a important space, something that you report to every day, and that we're going to, reinvest in the employees and in the town moving forward for the next 50 years. So, we're dealing with, space that has been recycled from other locations, and then the small garage here certainly has been there's multiple repurposing with build out of some mezzanines and stuff like that, but the space was never, it sort of has, the operations for DPW have increased over the years, and they certainly have overutilized the space at this point.
Christie?
Rob, how do you determine what what goes in enclosed space and what goes under the canopy storage?
So ideally, in my discussion with the engineers, if I could get rid of the canopy altogether, I would. I think that stuff should go indoors. To me, we'll still talk about that, but the canopy space is okay. But unless it is right now, it's sited on the north side of the building, and if it's canopied, it's literally not going to see the sun. It's completely enclosed, so it's subject to rusting and stuff. I mean, I would say you try to put stuff out there like dead storage, plastic stuff that so it's good, it's UV protected. Right now, we have things like the slide-in sanders that are plastic. I would say stuff like that would go in the canopied area, which is basically outdoors right now. It's sort of bulletproof. So I think the more we can put things like that in the canopied areas, the better. Other things that are sitting out that are subject to the rain, the snow, sometimes seasonal things could go out there in the canopied areas. So, and just in snow and ice conditions, if you can't fit passenger vehicles for the plow drivers in the building, the canopied areas could be an alternative too, so that when the guys are done snow and ice operations, they're not coming back to a vehicle that has a foot plus or inches of snow on it they have to clear. Just makes it a little bit easier to be able to when you finished plowing for so many hours to come back and have a vehicle that's ready to get into and go home and then shovel your driveway.
Richard?
Peter, I have a question for you. I need your expertise here.
Uh-oh.
No, I think you know this. I just can't wrap my head around 18.5 for a metal building. We're doing a fire station here for $20 million with all of those interior features and finishes. I don't know the square footage of the fire station, but why does the garage cost an equivalent amount? A simple metal building on a concrete pad.
Well, I think if you look at Rob's number, you shouldn't be looking at 18 million and divide it by, come up with the cost per square foot, because all of your FF&E and all your architecturals, I think the building itself, and Rob jump in, you're probably in the 8 to 10 million for the actual building, for the structure. It's the necessities you have to add to a building
Right.
or the project.
It's 3.5, I think, for the building.
So there you go.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's mainly that's utility costs. It's the high cost of all of the different subs involved with all of the different utilities within that structure. The actual structure itself, as I mentioned, you're talking about basically a pretty sizable warehouse, really.
Well, even on a light switch, if I could, explosion-proof light switches, you don't have them in your home, or you don't have them in a commercial space nor residential. And when you're dealing with some of the chems that they have or storage, you saw like the treehouse, I'm not sure what they hit in those palletized bags, but you have to have explosive-proof light switches, which are much more expensive than one of these on the wall. So exponentially, you're looking at a lot of that as an increase in cost too, over the norm.
Satisfied-ish?
Ish.
Well, I think one item that I think you'd spend in a heartbeat is $40,000 on abatement, because looking at what we've seen, you could lose that just in cutting up those wooden 2x4s and plywood with which the fertilizer sits on, because all that is contaminated. Even though it may seem simplistic, Clean Harbors would have a field day. They cut those pieces of wood up and put them in barrels and take them off. I mean, I think you could lose another 0 or 2 on just that one line item. That's what scares me.
I thought this included a big burn barrel. This doesn't. Christie?
Rob, it says here, the report recommends a combination of renovation and new construction. I'm just wondering, as opposed to the amount of renovation you're doing to any current buildings, if you are.
Just a point, the only renovation was the wash bay. That would be in the existing mechanics garage.
Okay.
That was the only renovation that was planned.
So you couldn't sort of reassign this project as like a campus improvements and new renovation, as far as it being a little bit more grand in scale, as far as the name of it, instead of just a garage? I just was trying to, what's the best way we can sell
100%
it?
sold that way when I first landed.
Yeah.
When we first looked at this is not a DPW garage project, right? This is a campus improvement project, and that's exactly the way I felt it should move forward under the original ask. We were asked to pare it down and to the bare bones. And so we did that, and it literally has become a garage project. So it, again, depends on what the project is. Is it a campus improvement project, or is it a garage project? And that just, it's going to boil down to, do we get the ancillary pieces to that support the garage, the fuel station and the relocated salt shed?
Solar.
You know,
Yeah.
is there a wash bay involved? I mean, so it just depends on what the project is.
Okay. I want to do a little cleanup thing and then get into some costs and make a comment. At our last meeting, and this just, these are points of information, and we need to correct the record if they're incorrect, and they appear to be. The question was asked and answered whether the $15 million is inclusive of a $3 million contingency. And it appears that that's, and the answer was yes, it is. So the ask for this request is not 15 million, or it is 15 million?
It was 18 million.
It's 18.
It's 15
Okay.
with the 3.
So we'll correct our minutes to reflect a miscommunication. The other thing I want to be clear, because based on that miscommunication and in relation to the question Christy just asked, question was asked, what buildings will remain and be utilized? And it's in what I have is the administration building, the mechanic shed, the salt shed, and a garage, and other structures will be demolished. So, Rob, can you just clarify specifically which buildings will remain and be used as they're currently purposed? Just, again, for clarity.
Yep. So right now, there's 2 structures that would remain, the admin building and the mechanics garage. Largely, everything else will either be demolished or taken down and rebuilt in a new location.
Including the salt shed?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll correct that.
And those are, those are something that would have to be done to just accommodate the location. The site is fine. The site's fine. It's 13 and a half somewhat acres of the overall, like 80, something like that out there.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is there's, wetlands around, there's habitat, there's other issues. So it sort of pushes that into that central location, which
Okay.
is going to require us to move things around. But we're going to limit the amount of required relocated buildings as much as possible. Clearly, that's going to cost, either our staff's time or more to the project.
Okay. And then on cost, I think I want to hit page 79 of your presentation, which gets into a couple of things. It gets into cost as a consolidated implementation is, so one, authorize, encumber, and start the project in a single phase or as a phased construction. And that will kind of take us over into a little bit of discussion on timeline. And before we go there, though, I want to be clear on this because I personally think it's important. And I'm looking at this again through the lens of annual town meeting, and also how other projects like these have proceeded. This is more like this is being handled more like. First of all, it's not adversarial in terms of the cost or support of the project. I want to be on record. I believe that the project, I support the project, and I think that we need to find a cost. We need to find the cost that addresses the issues that we have versus perhaps taking a number and paring it back. So, in other words, I want to be comfortable supporting a project where I know at least all of your base requirements are met, and I would like it to be demonstrated in some way, whether it's a cut and paste of the previous plans or something, so that it can be shown, because I think where I'm going with this is that building structures in the past have been presented to the citizens with some type of a rendering, obviously conceptual, in some instances line drawings of the actual building that it's intended to be built, it's HDC approved, and some idea of the program inside, not just a narrative, but a demonstration of how the space is utilized. I'm not suggesting that we have construction drawings put together for this before town meeting and so that we can make an evaluation, but I do believe we need to have a better handle on it as opposed to using the sewer as, the Nantucket sewer as an example, not to incite that cost of $80 million, but that's something you're not going to present drawings about. It's, it's sewer lines in the water, it's pump stations, it's all these different things that aren't necessarily going to translate into a building or a facility or a series of buildings that can be demonstrated.
I think we have a good handle on the space.
Okay,
I mean, I can't say, like, I'm going to tell you square foot for square foot right now, but I think that the engineer who has put the time in this project and has presented the feasibility study, along with taking our comments over the summer, has a very good handle on what that's going to look like, and has sketched together a revision of this.
So
we'll be happy to work together.
So you're saying you believe you can provide something?
A line drawing and
Thank you.
a revised site plan, definitely.
Okay, excellent,
Yeah.
thank you, I appreciate that. And then if you could get into a little bit of, again, let's look at the costs as they've been proposed. Now, this is, I want to back up a second here. We're looking at costs that are comparable to what we're discussing on your ask of $18 million. It's page 79 of the packet you presented. And I presume that this is the facility that you are requesting.
Yes, that's the one with the revisions to the original feasibility study.
Okay, so could you tell us a little bit about this and then roll that over into timeline?
Sure.
And again, I have 79 of your.
Yeah, I don't think it's apples to apples, because this is the feasibility report, and what you're looking at is what was in the capital packet.
Right, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Is this, because the numbers are close, was this revised to reflect the buildings that you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, so if you could use this as a guideline, and we'll know that the numbers aren't exact, either in terms of square footages or dollars, but they're pretty close. I mean, they're within, but single-digit percentage points.
Okay.
Because I want to have a little bit of discussion from you and your thoughts, because we need to evaluate it in our own recommendation. End goal, phase construction or non-phase construction?
Yeah, I would
And
definitely say
timeline.
non-phase construction. We have space now that, and we're going to be moving in a temporary trailer that's coming from the school project, currently housed down at the wastewater facility. Once that's up and running on the campus, we'll be able to have at least usable space for the staff. Other than that, we'll have up and running the mechanics garage and the admin building to support the efforts. So while we would demolish and ready the campus for the construction project, it's my understanding that we would be able to handle the disruption, and we do it as one foul swoop as opposed to trying to multiple disruptions, particularly if we're focusing on doing nothing but a single garage project. It doesn't make any sense at this point to do a phasing. I think the phasing was a discussion if we're going to do, if we had multiple things going on, including building renovations, we'd have to jockey that around, or it just allowed a different approach. So the phasing was something that came out of the original January feasibility study.
And if this were separate buildings,
Again, I'm sorry, back up a sec. The only phasing I think that could be considered here would be to potentially design the roof for solar and potentially incorporate solar as a second-year ask for a future investment.
okay, and then your timeline, I guess, is kind of what we're interested in right from the beginning, actual design and how you're seeing that come together. I'd like to get some input from Libby on how she's seeing a work group work formed and what their actual role will be. And
So building committee has gotten together. I think the first meeting was back in June. I'm pretty sure we've met twice, and we have a meeting scheduled for the 20th. So we're continuing to move along. Assuming this is moving forward, then I would say we'd see some additional activity over the course of the winter into early spring for a expected presentation at town meeting. with likely a rendering and some line drawings to support, the expected space with a general construction schedule. But I would say, if it's approved at town meeting, we'd be looking at moving forward, getting construction drawings ready to roll, and I think we could easily start, winter of 18.
Okay, and then before Libby on the work group is, how are you seeing, Rob, this phasing, not phasing in terms of construction, but phasing in terms of your operations and staging day-to-day operations that you're taking down and disassembling, admittedly, for storage areas and work areas, but some of those actually have functional use on a day-to-day basis. So how are you planning on addressing that?
As I mentioned, we would have a temporary trailer, and we'd utilize the mechanics garage and the admin building for any day-to-day operational space that we would need. And we would just, I think the demolition could be done very timely.
The temporary building, the temporary trailer,
Yes.
that's actually going to cover the amount of square footage you need to use day-to-day?
It's only...
Seems to be a little incongruity there if
it's-
we're looking at a...
It's 2 classrooms. We do a lot of work outside, frankly. So I think we'd be cramped utilizing the garage bays for the mechanic space. But frankly, most of the equipment is outside already. So we're not losing that capability. We're gaining it.
Right, so just soldier through the tight spaces, knowing that the light's at the end of the tunnel.
Yep.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions at this point, Peter?
Rob, with existing services, are there any existing services that we perform that could be jeopardized in the future, near or far, if our project doesn't go off in the timely manner of construction like you just noted in December of next year? Or are there any services that we will not be able to perform because of our existing structures?
I could make up a million excuses. I could tell you we have vehicles off island getting repaired because, they have been stored outside. We haven't been able to grade all summer long because we didn't have an operational grader. We finally got our old one up and running this fall out of desperation and provided services after the Hurricane Jose came through. So, we could go down that road. The bottom line is, we can tour the place or you can watch the video.
Yeah.
It's time.
I think that's good for potentially a list for the positive naysayers of services that will get better for us as an island, with a physical plant,
Sure.
with more training.
And frankly, I think people have seen significant increase in service. I think they've seen a far more clean island and positive services out there. We've gotten a lot of excellent positive feedback over the summer, and I think that will only increase when we're dealing with a new positive space.
Good.
I think back to Rich's comment earlier. This video is actually, believe it or not, this is after cleanup has occurred. So, we really do spend some time working on positive changes, incremental improvements. Not, we're not going to. I made it very clear to the staff. We're not. If we're expecting the town to step up and help us, we need to be helping ourselves on an everyday basis. We can't expect that we're going to sit there and collect, for instance, somewhere like 35 vehicles or thereabouts, and just continue to collect them as like a junkyard. We got a surplus. We got to move this stuff out. Where the location for everybody's surplus equipment. So we got to move it out. Otherwise, it looks like a junkyard down there. And then it's the broken window effect, right? You got a broken window, and next thing you know, you put up with it, and it continues to escalate. So the whole point is, we're doing better in policing our own campus and making sure that the level of expectation is much higher.
Peter?
So just to touch on that, so, it sounds like you've already started to make that change. Do you foresee it being that much harder once there is a brand new kind of bells and whistles facility, to step up that level of kind of proactive maintenance and, avoiding the broken window effect? I mean, I know it's hard to go from, something that is nearly impossible to maintain and upkeep to something that everything right off the bat is right where it needs to be, is perfect. You would imagine that it's a night and day kind of change.
Sure.
So for staff to go from, one to the other, it might be a tough transition.
No, I definitely respect the question. I think the point is that I would say I don't see an issue with us being able to maintain a new building or our own existing buildings moving forward, because what I see is what's changing is the attitude. I think most people that came to work here, there's a few that have been here for a very long time, but there's a lot of new employees that have been here under 10 years. And so for those folks to come to work every day and see this sort of thing, it's a bit overwhelming, right? And so what I think we've started to manage is it doesn't have to be cleaned up in a weekend. It's not going to be cleaned up in a weekend. So we're spending time periodically to go through and do those efforts, and it's having a pretty dramatic effect. Just it's general cleanliness, and we're making actual strides that are noticeable. Maybe not to people who haven't been out here before, but for our staff that's been there for a very long time, they're walking with a bit more pride. So I think that is certainly going to carry over with new equipment and new facilities.
It would certainly be a prideful facility, so you would hope to see, the same kind of reciprocation.
Definitely.
And then just general maintenance on the facility, is that going to fall under facilities maintenance department or DPW kind of combined?
Facilities falls under DPW right now, so it would.
So it would be kind of under the same umbrella.
Yes.
Thanks. Anyone else for Rob? All right.
So,
Yeah, Christie.
Nat had brought up in-floor heaters as opposed to the gas heaters. What's going on there? Gas heater?
I think the details are still being discussed.
Okay.
Which is a great segue to the work group. Libby, can you tell us a little bit about that and how it differs, for instance, perhaps from kind of some of the shortcomings we experienced, or some people would say shortcomings we experienced with the fire station. And by that I mean specifically having to go back and rebid it, and just how we're approaching that, having learned from what we've experienced recently between that and our island home, not mixing the elderly care in, but just the facility itself, and also the estimates with the sewer, which came in, 80 million came in at probably about half as much money. So just so we have an idea of the work group and how it's being handled, how it's pursuing its goals, and how it's pursuing funding.
Right now, we have sort of an informal work group, which I'd expect would probably continue until we have some direction on whether or not this project is going to go forward. I don't want to waste a lot of time with a work group if the project isn't going to proceed next year. So there are some lessons learned. I don't think every project is exactly the same, and I don't think you can totally compare the fire station to anything else, because that was much more complicated than just having to rebid it. There was a lot more to it than that.
Fair enough.
But I would imagine that I'd have a little bit of a more formalized work group with specific people on it who would be skilled in understanding how construction estimates are prepared and able to explain it to the public. We'd probably do a lot of the same things we did with this building and some other very large capital projects. This video, ride around with Gino, talking to different groups around town, and having people prepped to answer questions or make comments at town meeting.
That's good.
And
That's
be
good.
very current about the estimates. And understanding, though, as recently as last week, I heard on the radio on the Cape there was I think it was a fire station project that came in $3 or $4 million higher than their estimate. It's not an uncommon thing for estimates in this current construction climate to be coming in very different from even what they were estimating a few months earlier. So obviously we want to be on top of that. We want to work in the Nantucket factor and look at similar building projects that are happening right around now, like the water company, the fire station, understanding that some of the construction components are a little different.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, great. Thank you. We appreciate you coming
Thank
in. And I do think we need to get some type, I understand that your final product line drawings are going to be different, but I do believe that a floor plan of the structure and the mezzanine doesn't have to be super pretty, but something that we can be basing our decision and recommendation from and discussing when we evaluate would be very helpful. And if we're on schedule, we'll be doing that pretty soon. I think we're going to try and do a group, the first group of ranking evaluation and our recommendation tomorrow. I'm just thinking out loud here. So before Christmas, the week before Christmas, so the 17th or the 18th, I think it falls.
We should be able to get something to the committee by the end of next week.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
All right.
Peter?
Rob, do we have a meeting on the 18th, right, at 2?
20th.
It's not-
No, you're right. Monday. It's
yeah.
Monday.
Correct.
Monday.
Because then we have a FinCom meeting at 4
That's right.
on the
Monday.
18th.
Monday the 18th.
Yeah.
And don't, the dates, it's a Wednesday, Thursday. If I have the dates incorrect, I'm notorious for that. We'll be meeting a Wednesday, Thursday next week.
No, I've been in touch with the engineers. They're well aware that this is a hot topic right now, so I'm guessing we'll be able to take, the revisions we've talked about and the results of the feasibility study and package that fairly quickly.
And I think what's key is, I'm sorry, Christie, is that, Rob is also engaged, and the engineers have engaged staff members too, so it's not it's all inclusive.
Bottom up, kind of
Yeah.
to some extent.
The original needs assessment included a pretty wide interviews with various staff. So they've kicked all that around from very early.
Yeah.
And that's encapsulated in the feasibility study. I think that having those people on the committee moving forward is also helpful to keep those the people that are actually going to be using the space involved with the ultimate.
That's what addresses your concerns, Peter. Well, not concerns, but your comments are about, ownership and maintaining, the employees are part of it.
Change the culture. Christie?
Rob, the solar discussion, is that going to happen? You going to start that discussion, or is that going to just totally wait till after everything's done?
No, I will definitely start that with we threw it out as a idea
Yeah.
with the engineers when we first met with them, when I first met with them. It hasn't gone beyond that, but
No.
it will be a discussion we can have. I know they have examples of other buildings that they've done, other DPW garages that they've incorporated solar on before. So we'll definitely have that discussion again with them.
Jason?
I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I know it's a priority, and we'll probably talk about it tonight. This is on the agenda for tonight.
Great.
Probably, if it's not brought up, I will bring it up.
Okay.
So it's definitely something that I'm going to push. And maybe it's later. We'll have to think about it, how it all fits in.
Yep.
But it definitely should be something a big discussion.
You're talking specifically about solar?
Solar,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Great. All right, well,
so
thanks
much.
again.
All right.
Thank you.
Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, guys, so we're going to move on to quick review and finalize the format of our summary ranking worksheet. And it's really not just the summary ranking worksheet. It's a summary worksheet. So basically, this was the pass that we had last week. I don't know if any of you brought it, and if you did, great. But what it allows us to do, it's really the foundation for our evaluations and recommendations as a volunteer work group. We're taking all of our information. We're taking the requests in an orderly and rational manner, listing them out in a column by department, by category, the individual request with the Planet unique identifier. Then we're assigning the costs of the request, the town admin's recommendation and the FinCom's recommendation, and a column for our own. And the FinCom will be kind of like just a after the fact, I think, because we'll be obviously making a final report and a recommendation to them, which we'll be talking about a little bit later in the meeting. And just so that we can keep track and formulate our thoughts more easily, and then use that information to cut, paste, or paste by link into a report. The rankings will be there. The rankings of town admin, our own consolidated rankings. There'll be a column for you all to include your individual ranking, or just tick off during discussion in the box that you want to review what your ranking was. And then that can serve as a mechanism to make changes to your individual ranking and get them to Julia. That will be on a very tight schedule, and we'll revise the ranking. If any request rankings are revised, we'll have that for our pre-final review just before the draft of the final report is made. And then there are the columns for the kind of overriding items, which are an imminent threat for safety, or threat to public, legal requirement, whether it's a phased funding. So it's something we agreed to fund in a previous capital request. And then I think, Peter, can you mind I'm sorry I didn't bring mine. So that's the priority overlay. Then there's a couple of columns so we can discuss our the cost, how the capacity of operations and maintenance work. A great example would be the DPW garage facility, and they're kind of changing to keep the maintenance up. The time, whether we believe that, based on what we've heard and what we've seen, that it can actually be delivered within the period of the request. And then we'll have a column for the funding source, which will be, for our discussion purposes, in our recommendation. Are there any other thoughts on columns that could be included or should be included? While you're thinking about that, what we did, we have a few phase funding requests, and we have at least one request that is a multi-year request, Old South Road, but the funds are requested for FY19. So in the columns that give the cost by year, what's going to happen is we'll have one column that says FY19 request, and that will be the visible one on the report. But you'll be able to click on the column heading, and it will unfold to give you all the details, so that when we're having our discussion, we have the numbers in front of us, we have an understanding of what's going to happen when, what the plan is, and then also it becomes a tool next year. Hopefully we're going to have a little bit more time to be reviewing these things, and we can kind of see where things happened relative to what the plan was. More importantly, not timing, but cost. And I think that's pretty much the sheet. I'm hoping it's going to be as helpful as it's intended to be, at least writing the report. Because getting all this information in one place is going to be of critical importance for that. We don't have a lot of time for it. Any other thoughts or comments before we go into starting our evaluations and recommendations work tomorrow on that stuff?
Stephen?
Yeah, please, Chris.
Is there any way they could, I wouldn't mind 2 pages, but if they could just make the font maybe one or 2 times bigger?
Yeah.
or however they
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
group them, whether we're looking at it or anyone else. I just want to make sure that they're not struggling through it.
Sure. I think it's a good point. I don't know what the capacity is at your office. Can you do 11 by 17, Brian? Okay, so we could do 11 by 17. The other thing is, we're going to try and break these out by, our evaluation and recommendation procedure is going to revolve around reviewing initially small groups. So the water companies, police, when I say small department, I mean small department requests relative to the number of requests. Therefore, we have, we can group the departments with a smaller number of requests together and get through more departments up front, kind of get a little bit of a rhythm going. and more of them will fit on the sheet. And then we will try and group larger departments like DBW, transportation will be on one sheet, and general facilities on another for purposes of our sit-down printout review. In the digital world, they'll remain one list, kind of sorted. We'll have to determine the sort order. And then we will do, that's a great suggestion, we'll do a larger print format. Chrissy?
And then this might be for Libby, kind of, but I think you had mentioned something about adding a town administration ranking.
Yes.
And how does that differ from the initial inventory of capital requests you get that some you omit?
To the first question, that is on the revised sheet, adjacent to our own. And on the second, I think I follow you, but can you explain?
I'm guessing, is every single request that we have in front of us, every single one that town administration receives? Or are there some that you, because I know in the past, I think you've given us a abbreviated list to review. So I was just curious to how those two might differ.
I don't think we really did that this year.
It's pretty all in there, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if we did take anything out early on, we either moved it out or
Or it's out years or something?
it was less than 50,000.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think there was much that we did, if anything.
Richard?
Are there any requests that are not high priority that came before us? I think there were, I'm trying to remember. I think there were only 4 that I can think, I can't remember which department, where it was medium priority. But is it everyone's recollection that everything we've seen is high priority?
Sorry.
I was just going to, go ahead, and then I'll have a comment on the prioritization.
I was wondering, as
lists.
specified by the department head?
Yes, yes.
Gotcha. I mean, I tend to discount to a certain extent some of the high priorities that we see just because, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's several that I kind of ticked medium. Look, in a perfect world, we would have had more time, and I think we need to discuss that in kind of our after-action review. Personally, I think we're trying to cram way too much into too short a period of time. But having said that, I think it would have been nice to review. I haven't even reviewed my own rankings. I put them together, sent them into Julia, and trust that they're in the framework the way that everything works out. We will have a brief period. You guys will, I guess, term it homework to be looking at those yourselves, because what will happen is Julia will send out the spreadsheet with all of that information in it. So you'll be able to click on a tab, and it will be your input for a particular request, particular department. So if you want to go through and check something, you can do that. But in terms of the prioritization, back to the original, there were several that I deemed, not several, but relative to the whole, but there was a bunch that I deemed medium versus high based on actual, it was checked high, but the subject of the discussion was, it just didn't, after asking specifically, where does this fit into your list, and is this a high priority, and will it affect your ability to do the work? The answer was, not necessarily a yes, high. I don't think on any of the bigger items, it was just a few of them.
I mean, that's the essence of that part of our rankings, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
can make a determination on our own whether or not we agree that a high ranking, according to a department head, necessarily is a high ranking in our committee's view.
You got it, right?
Individually and as a whole. So,
Yep.
I mean,
100%.
whether or not 100% of the department's decisions say that they're high doesn't necessarily fall on us to also agree with their assessment.
Yeah, and then the consolidated ranking will reflect how we all felt, and then it helps eliminate a lot of discussion, because without eliminating the work that needs to be done behind it. Excuse me. In terms of the prioritization, there are, it looks like at least the preliminary recommendation from town admin is about a $2 million shortfall in the general fund relative to requests. So I do think we still need to we requested from each department that had and I'll pick this up on our matters outstanding, but I do believe we need to have the prioritization list from the department heads on their requests, a top to bottom list. If we've got to come up with a $2 million cut list, we need to be able to do it based on that information, as well as the information we had. So, Chris?
Yeah, but we should also have the independence to determine yourself if you think a project is priority. In other
Sure.
words, if we get this priority list, if the committee feels item number 3 is out of 10 is really not in our eyes, as this committee makes our recommendations, we certainly have that freedom to do.
Yeah, and you know what, I don't disagree at all. Actually, I support that. I guess I should clarify, when I say the $2 million shortfall, I'm using that as a stepping off point for the discussion of, we need the prioritization list. I think you're 100% correct. We may make a recommendation that's $2 million more than the town admin's recommendation. But to do that, we're going to need to know which projects they are, and part of that is going to be based upon not only our own rankings, but also the department head's prioritization. I think that'll be useful. Is there any other thoughts on kind of how we do that? And this isn't like the last discussion we're going to have on it. These things are going to come up during the evaluation. It's just, I'm trying to anticipate things so we can, make that more efficient. We're getting a little bit of pressure on time, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. And so trying to address things in advance is incredibly important when we're doing this. Anyone else, any thoughts? Christy, please.
I would say, and I'm actually glad that we're going to see Libby's rankings, because I want to see where town administration falls on some of these. But we probably need to determine how is that going to, how are we going to use that, and how is that going to weigh into our rankings? And is it going to are the individual Libby's in the groups going to all fall in together, or what ultimately is going to be the deciding factor on how the ranking sheets end up? Is it just going to be ours? Is it going to include Libby's? Just something to think about.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. In an ideal world, we would have the opportunity and the time, which we're not going to have in any instance, no matter what happens this season, to get the rankings from town admin, have our evaluation discussion on a request-by-request basis, utilize that number, if there's a difference, to be able to have a discussion and see what our town administrator sees in a way through her eyes, which may change, which will certainly inform and perhaps change our own ranking. We quickly make the change in our rankings if we each deem so, and then our final ranking, our adjusted ranking, is there as a final. So it's a useful tool in that regard. I think now it's unfortunately going to be not what it's intended to be. It's going to be more of just kind of like, oh, look, yours is different. To the extent we have time, let's ask you why. And then we'll try and factor that into our final evaluation. We won't really have time to factor it into a ranking level type of discussion. I think it could be very useful discussion over the course of all these requests for all of us, in terms of like continuity of sitting in a chair, maybe several or at least a couple of appointments in a row, to have the benefit of learning from our town administrator what she sees and knows. And that's one way to trigger that discussion, is by having a ranking that's different and then having the discussion. Again, we're not going to have time to do that now. Perhaps my goal is that we're getting things kind of addressed so that next year that's one of the benefits we experience. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so it looks like we've gotten that one done. Next on our agenda is to review outstanding items and issues and to set a date for final resolution to the extent we can. So hoping if you guys had any matters outstanding, you were able to identify them and bring them today. If not, I don't know if you guys, I have a list. I've been keeping notes of comments that members have made. And from the minutes, kind of like when I review the minutes, I highlighted it and print it out, and it goes in the pile of, outstanding matters. And so I put that list together. If anyone wants to start, and if not, I'll start. And then if you want to add to the list, what's the pleasure? Okay, so I'll go ahead. So matters outstanding, no particular order. We just discussed the top to bottom prioritization lists. And I would see that those are relevant for the airport, the DPW, which is the general categories in transportation, sewer, and water. And none of those parties should be surprised. We did ask specifically for those, and they did acknowledge and state that they would provide them. I have a note, the airport equipment building cost, the equipment building, that the cost would ideally be in line with the police marine structure, which is strikingly similar, which is approximately $155 a square foot. And that is, I think by memory, the police was somewhere around $459, and the airport was in the neighborhood of $3 million. It was a really big number. So in any event, some clarity on that and where they are. We did discuss it during the meeting, and there was, they did state that they would look at that and get back to us. And I did hear from an airport commissioner saying that they were concerned about it and they wanted to bring that in too. Water companies, I have a note that we need a better grasp of the water tank maintenance, that it's a high cost of maintenance versus also scheduling a replacement of the water tank within a 10-year period. And then my own supplemental note on that was, and Libby or Brian, I'll give you an emailed list of this stuff. You're not, obviously.
But I was going to ask you, is that Wanacommet or Wisconsin water tank?
Both, I think, because if my recollection is correct, there was a request for maintenance with the epoxy, to epoxy around the bolts, which is all good, and I don't think anyone is questioning whether we do it or not. But at the same time, there's a in the out years is replacement of the water tank, and then the discussion was, well, if the maintenance doesn't work as well as we hope, and I'm paraphrasing here, we will still need to replace the tank.
Okay.
So I think the thrust of it is the cost versus the return, and then as opposed to just waiting and risking it, what type of warranty or guarantee in the contract language do we have that the epoxy is going to perform to its stated qualification and durability. Peter, did you?
No.
Okay. So that was one thing, because there's big dollar numbers involved on both ends. Sewer, minor item, which was a Sparks Ave area improvements map. School, the Bacchus Lane, I have in my notes to stop over and review with their Director of Facilities, Diane O'Neill, and I will do that ASAP. I ran into her last night at HDC.
Are you talking about the expansion of the admin building?
Oh, no, actually, the playgrounds area and how it relates to, how this year's request relates to last year's request, because there was some comments about that and questions, so I was going to get some clarification from her on that. Did you have a question on the administrator? I know you had a concern about it, and so is it something we want to rise to a level of getting more information, or is it something we want to address separately just during our evaluation and recommendation?
In my opinion, it's our evaluation.
Okay, thank you. And you? Same?
Evaluation, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just so we know. So this is kind of different altogether. I would like, it's part of our purview, certainly, is to get an idea of what the effect on the mill rate, Brian, due to expiring, or I should say retired capital exclusions, and the effect on the mill rate due to retiring debt exclusions.
Well, there are no capital exclusions.
We have none,
no retiring capital. We don't have it.
because they're a 1 year and then they're implemented?
Right. So
Okay.
There's none currently.
And we have none current?
There's one currently proposed recommended by town administration.
But none last year?
None last year.
Okay. Okay, so just the debt exclusions. And then when we talk about dates for these things, that's clearly going to be something that we don't need to process, immediately. It's just something it would be good to have in our general understanding. And along those lines, too, is a report on the open appropriations that we've been discussing for a while. And then last, I think, but it covers a little bit of ground, is actually not last, DPW garage facility, a line drawing with plan, which we spoke to Rob about today. That's from my notes yesterday, and he's going to deliver. And then on the town recommendation, Libby, I guess where we left that was clearly enterprise funds with sources of funding, which you would be doing anyways for certain. And then you would be doing these anyways, but just so we identify them, is for any requests as applicable, any grant or outside funding information. So the CPC contributions, if any, the FAA and the state contributions to the airport, the state regarding the harbor building. Brian, I understand that amount may depend on the lump sum or a drawdown type grant. So if you just footnote that maybe somewhere for us to click, so it's not a question later. And then last I have on that is the state Chapter 90 funding. Just if we're relying on, to the extent that we're looking at any requests, what portion of that we're looking at a reimbursement? Or are we looking at, because I don't anticipate we're looking at requests anticipating, what is our annual allotment, $400,000 a year on Chapter 90?
It's
It changes based on the bond bill that they authorize.
So, so let me ask you, how are you incorporating that into the requests?
Well, that would be incorporated, so
On the tail end, after the fact, is a reduction on the dollar amount?
it's on top of the request.
Yeah, the way we've been doing Chapter 90 since I've ever been here is we wait until we know what the number is,
Uh-huh.
which it doesn't usually happen until March or April. And then DPW comes up with a list of projects that are going to be happening, and they are mostly resurfacing or sidewalks, or from time to time there's a special purchase, like I think we purchased an infrared patching machine with Chapter 90, some supplement to, we may have used Chapter 90 a little bit for the Milk Street bike path, but those projects I don't think have really come through Capcom.
Okay, so what I was, and maybe I misinterpreted, but I thought that that would go towards the annuals in some regard for DPW, like the road maintenance request or the multi-use.
Well, for example, if Rob came in with his operating budget with, I'm making up a number, $1 million, and we say, you're going to get $500,000 in your operating budget, but we're going to have Chapter 90 of 6.
Okay.
So your total operating request might end up being more like $1 million, but not from tax levy.
Okay. So you're saying that Chapter 90 would, because this is just informational and just trying to resolve it as an outstanding item on the list, is that Chapter 90 is not applied to a particular capital request typically and won't be this year.
Because we don't
Correct.
have a number until.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
good.
no, it's
Yeah.
fine. I just want to understand it when it comes up in discussion.
To try to apply Chapter 90 for next year at this date is impossible because we have no idea what the funding's going to be yet.
Gotcha.
Um,
And then sometimes you apply it to operating and sometimes you apply it to capital.
Yep.
Okay, just again, so we're kind of developing institutional knowledge here amongst ourselves with all the different balls that are up in the air. Down here. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. Any other thoughts on the matters outstanding? I haven't heard from Nat on it, so I think he's probably good. All right, good. So we have no committee reports. Date of next meeting, and I want to discuss, we're kind of at that point in our process where we might review and discuss some meetings beyond our own. So Board of Selectmen and FinCom. And our final report. So I want to focus, I think, first on the presentation meeting for the final report. I don't want to make too much out of the presentation meeting. It's, we're going to have a written report. It's really going to be kind of a Q&A. Hopefully people are going to review it. I don't think it's benefits to sit down, and maybe I'm wrong, and this is why I'm bringing it up so I can get the feedback from our town administrator, to sit down and do a full-blown presentation of, page by page, this is what we're doing and why. It's written. It's kind of like when people stand there and tell you what's on a PowerPoint presentation. I don't necessarily see the value in it, but if we provide it and they review it and have questions, we're there to interact live, is how I'm hoping it will go down. But I think, overall, my estimation, again, I'm working from notes here. It's been a busy week. We've done we're doing fairly well with our timeline. A brief recap is, let's see. So we built into this year's schedule to cover the additional criteria required under the FP&P and the rankings. And the way the cookie crumbled, not all the requests were in when we set up the schedule. We did that back on October 6th. Sewer came in October 26th with, a lot of requests, which is, what they need, so we need to process them. But this year, based on quick counts, we have nearly twice as many requests as last year. We got approximately 90 versus approximately 45. And the proposed requests this year are nearly 4 times the dollar value of last year. And I don't want to be using dollar numbers casually, but we're looking at approximately $84 million this year versus $22 million last year. We did have some setbacks schedule-wise, but I feel that if we resolve the outstanding items that we've just discussed timely, I'm pretty confident we can at least keep our schedule, if not shorten it. On our schedule is to get to Libby ups and downs, our ups and downs on requests individually by January 4th, and a final report is due January 18th. Libby has brought up a request from the FinCom chairman and at least some members of the Board of Selectmen to move up the date of our final report and or move up the date of the meat of our recommendation. I suggested to her we discuss this today. Personally, I'd like to move the final report up at least a week if we can, reasonably do so. And I was going to ask her that we wait to actually have that discussion until tomorrow after we've done our first set of reviews, so we have a better handle on how long it's going to take us to do our evaluation and recommendation, because that's going to determine individual request, request by request, because that's going to determine when we've got everything together so we can actually put together a final recommendation. So that's what I'm suggesting we do, is we wait till after we've met tomorrow and had our discussions. And then we can, finalize whether we can move things up or not. I'm a little concerned I just want to say, for the record, we put our schedule out October 6th, anticipating that we had a lot of work to do. It turns out we have even more work to do than we thought. We did ask FinCom and Board of Selectmen for their input on the schedule. At that point, specifically, Libby did, to see if there was any particular issues or concerns, and we heard nothing back. So now to advance our schedule fairly dramatically, I think it's kind of unrealistic. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on schedule, but that's kind of where I am with it. Richard?
Can we just review what dates we're looking at
Correct.
tomorrow? The 13th, the 14th, and the 18th? Is that
Yes.
it for December?
And I think we may, this was kind of a to trigger discussion as to whether you guys are available on the 19th. Because again, I don't have any issue working overtime to help get the report together, but we can't do what we can't do. It has to be based on our getting together, making evaluations and recommendations.
I do.
So are people available on the 19th?
I have it in my schedule, it's booked on the 19th.
He's already got it
Okay.
somehow.
I don't have the calendar in front of me, but
And we're considering the 18th and the 19th, Monday and Tuesday.
But I don't have the 14th. I have a FinCom on the 14th. I don't have a CapCom.
right. Okay, so we'll resolve schedule, but you guys are basically available. What the 18th and the 19th are
Monday, Tuesday.
Monday, Tuesday.
So
Because
we're
the
not
holiday.
on Thursday, the 14th.
Thursday the 14th. Yep.
All
We
right,
are-
I don't have that. That's the only one I don't have.
We discussed that last week.
I
So
wasn't here.
it'll be today, tomorrow, the 13th, the 14th, what were the other two?
18th, 19th.
18th, 19th, which are on Monday, Tuesday.
All right, so the 18th, we have a DPW at 2 and a FinCom at 4. Well, I do.
All right.
I want to let you know that I'm not going to be here tomorrow, and I can't do the 14th.
Okay, so Libby, no.
I can jam in the 18th, because I already had down the 19th.
Bug.
And that, boom.
So we'll have Libby.
And we're doing our evaluation, so we can, if there's any questions for Libby, we can always catch up on the next one. And that still gives us time. Okay, great. So the other item, okay, so we had tentatively scheduled a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen in the FinCom to kind of review where we are. As a tentative matter, I don't think, it was a tentative scheduling. I don't believe we should be doing it. Personally, that was for the 18th of this month. I don't think we're prepared to do anything productive with just beginning our evaluations and recommendations, and we'll be mid-stride at that point, or towards the end of wrapping them up. So my suggestion is that we don't meet that date for that purpose, and we instead have the time to be focusing on our own work. However, I did suggest, based on input from other members of the committee, it was brought up here, that some type of a directional meeting, which might accomplish some of the same goals, could occur between the chairs. So the idea of a directional meeting amongst the chairs was that it's an informal discussion focused solely on the capital request and costs. So it's an opportunity to kind of understand respective priorities. Right now, we're working off a general statement of, and I'm not diminishing this, but to make the point, to focus on infrastructure. And that seems a little bit light to me. I would like to have a little bit of a better understanding of where the other chairs are, at least in terms of what their thoughts are, and maybe some after if they don't have feedback from their members, after they've had a meeting with some feedback from their members, so that we can sit down, have a discussion about that, open a dialogue, including the fact we're faced with at least a $2 million shortfall for the general fund in terms of recommendations, to let them kind of get their feedback on that, and also convey that we may be making a recommendation that's for more, and kind of get an idea of how they feel about that. So it's a dialogue meeting. So we have a general direction. We're all working together in a collaborative manner. Even if we don't come up with the same conclusions, we're all on the same page in a general sense. The other thing that it seems to me like a good time to discuss in advance, what, if any, role Capcom will have beyond our recommendations, either at annual town meeting or before. And as I said before we met this morning, if special town meeting was a prelude to annual town meeting, we might be called upon to speak. And if we're going to do that, I prefer that we reasonably anticipate and plan, as opposed to a week before we're going to be asked to be getting involved. That's just not how I operate. And there's no reason to be operating that way if we can have a little bit of a dialogue. And they say, well, we're not interested in you getting involved in that. That's great, as far as I'm concerned, not having to stand up at town meeting and speak. Or one of us having to stand up at town meeting and speak. But I would prefer that we have a dialogue so we understand what they're thinking. Or if they weren't thinking about it, we begin a dialogue so that they can begin thinking about it. And then we can kind of be a little more dynamic and in a proactive way, so that if one of us doesn't want to speak and another one feels strongly and an article is called, that person is prepared well in advance to stand up and articulate our recommendation and the basis for it. That's not something that's going to happen if we find out about it a week beforehand by an email from someone saying, "Oh, you guys, we need you to speak on this." Jason,
I think it's a great idea to have one or two of us, particularly, Peter and I went in and did the IT. Something comes up with IT.
Sure.
We know the most about it. We studied it.
Yep.
Right. The DPW or the transportation. You have two people who can speak just in case someone can't be at town meeting for
Right.
some kind of emergency. Kind of assigning us.
Yeah.
You two got this one. You got this one.
I like that idea, and it also plays off. You contain it. It plays off the strength of our designees. They've been there. They've been working on things, and then it's a question of whether. We're an advisory and we make a recommendation. Then it comes down to whether town admin, the Board of Selectmen, and FinCom feel they want us involved in that process at town meeting. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't be. I'm not suggesting we should be. I'm suggesting we should have that dialogue so we're well prepared. And this is a good time to start that dialogue if we're meeting, just to have a discussion about it, if we're meeting about the actual capital requests, the magnitude of the requests, and how the different committees may feel about how to pursue them. So that was the idea of a directional meeting. Does anyone think that that dialogue is a bad idea? All right, so I would ask that we ask them. Libby, I don't know if you can do that.
Yep.
And we set something up. And if, I guess for me as the chair, because I want, when I say the chair is going to meet, this is an opportunity for a very efficient meeting in terms of not having a whole bunch of people around discussing matters without a really specific agenda, talking about things we don't really have a lot of details on. That's, to me, a waste of time. So what I would hope is that the chairs would have some feedback from their members on just a general feeling of what they're supporting in terms of the capital request. Have FinCom and Board of Selectmen, forgive me, I don't know this, received a copy of the requests themselves? The list of requests with costs?
No, I don't think so.
So what do you think about this, is getting them that list with your recommendations? They might have a brief discussion, review it, not telling them what to do. I'm just suggesting as a interoperational type of a thing. They might review it amongst themselves, and at their meetings just have a 5-minute conversation or a 10-minute conversation, so that when the chairs meet, we each have an understanding of where our members are. I think I will have a general, if not specific, understanding, because we're already going to have started evaluations, and we've discussed a lot of these things, and you get the read of the meeting. But I think that would be a really productive use of everyone's time and getting us on the same page. What do you think?
Fine by me.
Is that okay? And then, can you give me your ideal? It's not lip service. I wanted to know, I want to move our stuff up if we can. What is the ideal for you, Libby, in terms of? I mean, I'd like to have all this stuff done yesterday, believe me. But what's the ideal for you in terms of getting? We have you down to get our ups and downs on the individual requests January 4th, which I think is still probably going to be the tightest date that we can do. Maybe a little bit sooner. Maybe just before January, New Year's. We could do that. But I'm not sure, because I think we're going to need a date after the holiday to meet and make sure we're all on the same page with a final on that, so we can hand it to you. But what are your thoughts on those dates, the 4th and the 18th?
Well, I have a meeting down for the 10th also. But anyway, my feelings are that the 18th is getting a bit late. If we could wrap it up at the latest by the 10th, that would be great. But we have pressures in other areas as well. Brian and Julie and I are supposed to be devoting our time this week and beginning of next week to our budget presentation, which is the biggest thing we do all year. And we're finding it difficult to focus a little bit on that because of other things that have happened, not operationally. Capcom meetings have increased. We had a special town meeting, which took up a lot of time and diverted from the budget process and, the usual stuff. Plus, people are going to be out, including me, the last week of December. I am not coming into any of these buildings that week, so forget about it.
God bless you.
And I'm not doing any work that week for the town of Nantucket. So I'm getting a little worried about what's going to happen, what's expected prior to the 4th, between now and the 4th. So the directional dialogue, whatever we're going to call it, meeting with the chairs is fine. I'm happy to send the preliminary list of the projects to BOS and FinCom. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I'll talk to Don and Matt today about if they want to have a agenda item at a BOS meeting, either next week or the week after. FinCom might keep a general overview, maybe, on its agenda for the 18th, which is what it sort of preliminarily had on there. Maybe the 14th, whatever. But maybe if they get those preliminary reviews, that'll make them a little more comfortable with what's coming.
And just on, it's topical, I can make myself available pretty flexible before the holiday, as soon thereafter as possible, you know, once they've got a chance to talk about it, we could meet, subject to their schedules.
Okay, so I got a little work to do with those two about that.
But does that help? I hope.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe getting something on the BOS agenda would help without hopefully getting into too deep of a discussion about stuff we've already talked about very deeply here, but they haven't been involved, so.
Right. Yeah, I understand where that could kind of be, it could kind of go off on tangents.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking not to do because it
Right.
creates other issues. But, I mean, to the extent you could help frame the discussion that we're not looking for specific input on specific requests. We're looking on input as a matter of these are the groupings, these are the general dollar amounts.
Yeah,
What
these
are
are
your
the-
initial reactions?
Yeah, these
And
are
I-
potential funding sources. We are looking at a pretty significant number of overrides. at,
Yeah. Because
town
that's
meeting.
really going to be what helps us to, look, we're going to make our recommendation based upon our own evaluation, but it doesn't hurt for us to be aware of what else is out there so that to the extent we can get things to dovetail, we're not, you know, gears aren't crashing against each other at a later date when time is really more of an issue. That's what I'm hoping to avoid. Okay.
Yeah, so I guess in conclusion, if we can try our best to get things completely done before the 18th, closer to the 10th.
Okay. So we'll discuss that some more tomorrow after we do our initial set. Just, I'll be thinking about it while we're doing what we're doing and how it fits in. Christie?
Something tomorrow that we can discuss. I just wanted to get your take on how you see with the new process, how you see the final report looking. I know it's
That's a really good
and
question.
somehow, you know, how do we simplify all of this? You know, I think we should go into the report with a simplified version of all these projects
Yeah.
and how that is. But I'd like to, as we review our rankings and stuff, I'd like to have some idea what that final report might look like, so I could sort of try to conceptualize how things are going to fit and
Well, I think we're,
but
Yeah.
we can just something to think about because I think we should discuss
Yeah.
it tomorrow a little bit.
well, I think, I just to respond very
Yeah.
briefly now is I think, you know, we'll key off what we did last year, which was, you know, basically a dollar amount and the narrative of what the request was and our conclusion, so that there's a familiarity, we're kind of bridging. And then, you know, we'll obviously add references to what the rankings are all about and how that works, you know, brief narrative, kind of an elevator pitch type, you know, 30-second thing. You know, ideally we would be, you know, I'm not a big about bells and whistles guy unless they're necessary, but I am a belt and suspenders guy, and I'd like to have as much in our report as possible, right down to an appendix with the rankings and individual member rankings. Now, it's overkill and it's beyond the level of our resources this year. I think maybe what we're looking at is something that takes what we had last year, adds a little bit of what we've done to demonstrate what we've done, and not so much to demonstrate, oh, look what we did, but to provide the information. And we do it knowing that this is, you know, the beginning of part of the same process we're involved in, that the report, the end result report is going to be, look, the bigger picture is that we have a report that we have a database, we have all the information, we have the rankings, it all goes in, it all goes to reports, all of that gets fed into a template, and our report gets printed by the touch of a button, including we have a narrative field for each one that's our recommendation. Right. So that at the end of the process, the human involvement, which is really a waste of time, repeating it every year, is that the formats are there, the templates are there. We input the information as we go, we update it live, and then we print it out. It's done. We're not there. It's going to be a relatively simple report. I don't know to what extent rankings are going to be there. I would like to feature them. I think they were important in the process. And I think it's a really good point. Let's discuss it as we go.
Yep.
Any other thoughts? No? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
All right.